this time. And he, just to introduce him, he did his PhD from HRI under Rajesh Gopakumar, and at 2018, and then he's been 2 years at the University of Napoli, and now he's at Southampton actually. Mrityunjay, go ahead. Yeah.
So thanks, Justin, for the invitation and the introduction. So today I will talk about one of the work which I have been involved in during last couple of months. So this will be about some higher spin CFT correlation functions in momentum space. And this work is with Raffaele Marotta, who is in INFN Naples, Charlotte Slight, who is in Durham, and Kostas Iskendaris, who is in Southampton, and Massimo Taronna, who is also in Naples. So let me begin with a brief outline. So I will first talk about some generalities of CFTs, and then I will consider why we should worry about momentum space representation. And then I will describe this work which we have been doing, and then end with conclusion and some outlook. Let me begin with some generalities. So I will first talk about why conformal field theory, and then some examples from different fields, and then some kinematics about conformal field theory. So why conformal field theory? So during the last few decades, the study of conformal symmetry has become indispensable in many areas of theoretical physics. And I shall begin by a brief survey of their application. So from the perspective of high energy physics, the conformal symmetry is encountered while studying usual QFTs itself. So in the traditional paradigm of perturbative quantum field theory, the couplings change with the energy scale. And this running of coupling is made precise by Wilson's renormalization group approach using beta function. So in the space of all the couplings, there are fixed points which have vanishing beta functions. And it turns out that the theories at fixed points exhibit a larger conformal symmetry, and these are the conformal field theories. So actually the vanishing of beta function only implies that you have a scaling symmetry, scale invariance of the theory. But then one can construct a quantity which in two dimension is called C function, and then in higher dimension it's called F and A functions. And using this, one can show that this scale invariance at the fixed point gets enhanced to conformal symmetry. So the behavior of theories at fixed points and in their vicinity, they govern the behavior in the rest of the coupling space. So for example, if you know the behavior in the vicinity of all these fixed points, then you know how these couplings will behave for general energies. So CFTs play an important role in having a deeper understanding of QFTs due to this reason. So now the theories with conformal symmetry are well defined, and they can be studied non-perturbatively. And further, conformal theories have been used to describe a wide range of phenomena in statistical condensed matter, cosmology, and high energy physics. Let me mention few of these. So one application is in statistical system. So a challenging problem for the statistical systems is the behavior near the second order phase transition, where systems parameter change discontinuously. And it turns out that the second order phase transition in statistical system can be described by conformal field theories. So for example, this is the famous phase diagram of water. The one-dimensional lines, they describe the first order phase transition, which have a non-zero latent heat.
Is there some interference from your side, or because no other microphone is open, but I seem to get some noise. Do people get the noise? No. Okay,
yeah,
it's mine.
No, I'm hearing him quite clearly.
Okay, so it's mine.
No, but I'm getting some static actually.
I also get
now it's
now it's okay, right? Now it's okay somehow.
Now it's okay.
Yeah.
It is actually better now.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll just leave whatever it is now. Okay, go ahead. Maybe there is some, your microphone is moving or something. It could be that actually. Yeah. Yeah.
So is it
Yeah.
better?
Something.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Something. Okay. Go
so
ahead.
So as I was saying, so as we move along this curve separating liquid and gas phase, we approach a point where there is no distinction between liquid and gas phase, and this is the critical point. And the state at this point is described by a second order phase transition, and it turns out that it can be described by a conformal field theory. Um, so at this point, of course, latent heat becomes zero and system parameters change discontinuously. And this existence of CFTs also explain the universality behavior observed in statistical systems. For example, 3D Ising model and the critical point of water, they are described by the same CFTs. And then, this universality happens. So we observe the same, say, critical exponents in many different systems. And this happens because many of the points in the theory space, they flow to the same fixed point. So another application is in the context of early universe cosmology. So in the standard model of cosmology, the universe went through a rapid expansion, and this was this phase of inflation, and this inflationary phase in the early universe can be approximated by a de Sitter space at the leading order. So this is the de Sitter metric, and h is a constant, and just by a coordinate transformation one can put the metric in this form. And what happens is that so in this coordinate system one can see that at tau equal to 0 this space time ends. So this tau equal to 0 is the future infinity of the de Sitter inverse, and so this is just a cartoon representation of this evolutionary stages of universe. So here there is an inflation. So this green patch, so that endpoint is the endpoint of the inflation. And now, since this universe during inflation can be thought as de Sitter at leading order, so it means that the universe at the end of inflation, it can be thought as the future infinity of a de Sitter space. Now, it turns out that de Sitter is a maximally symmetric space. So it has like 10 isometries, and one can show that these isometries act as conformal symmetry at the future infinity of this space. So it means that one can study the state of the universe at the end of inflation by conformal symmetry at the leading order. So now next application is in string theory, and it turns out that conformal field theories are used heavily in string theory. So in string theory, elementary particles are one-dimensional objects which trace one two-dimensional surface in space-time. And the theory living on this surface is a conformal field theory. And it turns out that for the propagation of elementary one-dimensional object in space-time to be consistent with quantum mechanics, it is only possible if the space-time has 10 dimensions. So if all the 10 directions are non-compact, then these CFTs are free theories, and if some of the directions are compact, then they are more involved theories. And demanding that this conformal symmetry remains unbroken at the quantum level, that gives rise to Einstein's equation of motion. CFTs have also been used in the context of holography. So string theory has provided a concrete realization of the idea that higher dimensional gravity theories are dual to lower dimensional QFT, and this goes by the name of ADS-CFT correspondence. And the gravity theories living in the anti-de Sitter space-time are dual to quantum field theory living on the boundary. And these theories are typically conformal field theories. So this is just a cartoon representation of ADS space. So this picture just explains that as you go near the boundary, metric is such that all these triangles have the same size. Just a cartoon representation. So let me now describe some details about CFTs. So together with Poincare invariance, a CFT also has a scaling and what is called a spatial conformal symmetry. So a spatial conformal symmetry is essentially an inversion preceded and followed by a translation. So for this reason, it is often enough to demand that invariance under Poincare scaling and inversion transformation is enough for a CFT. A conformal field theory is defined by two sets of parameters, this delta I and Cijk. And the delta I govern the behavior of operators under the scaling and are known as conformal dimension. And the 2-point function of the operators involve this data, this delta I. And the other dynamical data is contained in the 3-point function, which is given here. So all these functional form of xi are fixed by conformal symmetry. The higher point correlators are also heavily constrained by conformal invariance. For example, for n scalar operators phi I, the conformal symmetry implies this form. So here this alpha ij are related to conformal dimensions delta I in this manner, where alpha ij are symmetric and alpha ii equal to 0. And this f of u is an arbitrary function of these variables u, which are this n into n minus 3 by 2 conformal cross ratios. And this f of u is not fixed by conformal symmetry. We can also have spinning operators having Lorentz indices. And these spinning operators can have multiple tensor structures. So far I have talked only about the scalar. So these correlators are for the scalar operators. But in general, if you have spinning operators, they can have multiple tensor structure. So one example which will be useful later is the 3-point function of 2 spin 1 operators and 1 conserved current. So if you have these two operators, say a mu1, a mu3, having conformal dimensions, this is actually delta 1 equal to delta 3. There is a typo here. So it can have it has in general 3 different tensor structures, and these functions fi are completely fixed by conformal symmetry. And for delta 1 different from delta 3, there are only 2 independent structures.
Yeah, there is a lot of disturbance from your end. Is it possible for you to switch to a microphone?
Yeah. 1 minute. Is it still there?
No, sometimes it is there, sometimes it is not there.
Yeah, when you speak and when you move around a little bit, I think it's coming. Maybe it's something to do with the microphone. Yeah.
Is there wind there?
No, wind is not there, but maybe let me move a bit closer. What about now?
I think when you speak, I guess it is coming. Anyway, go ahead, I guess. What can we do?
Can see. Okay, let's. So solving it. Sorry.
Continue, yeah, don't worry about it. I continue. Okay. Yeah.
So solving a CFT means finding these conformal dimensions delta I and the 3-point function coefficients Cijk. And in general, there are very few techniques to solve this problem. And the computations using the Feynman diagrams are not very useful in this case. A more powerful non-perturbative technique is so-called this conformal bootstrap technique. So in this method, one equates 2 different expressions of 4-point function. So if you have a 4-point function, then one can evaluate it in 2 different ways, say direct channel and cross channel. and demanding these two different ways of evaluating this 4-point function gives an infinite set of constants on the conformal dimensions and the 3-point function coefficients. And there has been a lot of numerical as well as analytical progress in constraining the CFT data using these bootstrap equation in last few years. So now let me move to the momentum representation. So I will first talk about what are the difficulties in considering momentum space in conformal field theories, and then I will consider why we should still care about studying CFTs in momentum space. So in the usual Poincare invariant QFTs, we are usually interested in perturbations around wave-like solutions. So for this reason, the momentum space turns out to be very useful since it allows us to work with Fourier harmonic modes. So the decomposition of a function is in terms of these Fourier modes. And the momentum space also has many advantages for QFTs. The single and multi-particle states show up as poles and branch cuts in momentum space, and they give nice structure to S matrix. And moreover, the physical requirements of locality, causality, and unitarity translate into some analytic properties of momentum space amplitude. So for example, locality means some kind of polynomial boundedness. Causality is related to some nice behavior under analytic continuation. And unitarity translates into some cutting rules. In contrast, in conformal field theories, we have a continuous spectrum since there is no mass scale. And due to the absence of these isolated single particle states, the momentum space amplitudes do not have simple poles. And moreover, the scaling and spatial conformal transformations, they act non-trivially on the Mondel-Sturm variables pi.pj, unlike the Poincare transformations, which keep these Mondel-Sturm variables invariant. And due to these drawbacks, the momentum space representations for conformal field theories seem very involved, and they have not received much attention. However, in spite of these difficulties, the momentum space results for CFTs have been required in many physical applications in last few years. Let me mention some of these. So again, we consider the early universe cosmology. So during the inflationary phase, there were continuous pair production of particles, and the rapidly expanding universe separated these particles, creating local dense spots, which later became galaxies and galaxy clusters. So this is just a cartoon representation of this thing. So during inflation, you have this spontaneous pair creation of particles which get separated. And then this correlation between these dense spots, they can be measured by 2, 3, and half point functions of density perturbations today. So the Fourier transform of 2 and 3-point functions are known as power spectrum and bispectrum. And these are the sought after quantities in observational projects of Cove, WMAP, Planck, etc. And since these, as I mentioned earlier, these correlators, you have this conformal symmetry during inflationary phase at the leading order. So these correlators are constant by conformal symmetry. So due to this reason, the result of CFT correlators are needed in momentum space. And some other areas where the momentum space CFT results have been needed are these. So for example, for studying some quantum critical transport properties, studying cosmology via the tools of ADS-CFT correspondence, is for studying conformal anomalies, also for deriving some flat space S matrix rule from ADS-CFT correspondence, double copy structure in CFTs, and also for studying some parity odd structures in Chern-Simons theories. So let me now move to this higher spin CFT correlators. So I will first talk about the strategy for calculation, and then describe some explicit computation, and then move to application. So our goal would be to know the expression of these CFT correlators in momentum space. And one obvious way to do this is to perform the Fourier transformation of the position space correlators. However, a problem with this procedure is that the position space correlators are usually valid at non-coincident point. So for example, if you have a correlator of this kind, then this is fine as long as the points don't coincide. But if they become close to each other, then there is a problem. So the correct procedure is to first regularize these position space correlators and then do the Fourier transform. But it turns out that even after first of all, regularization itself is too cumbersome. So beyond some simple cases, it has not been done in general. And even after regularization, it is too cumbersome to carry out the Fourier transform. But it is possible to analyze the conformal invariance directly in the momentum space. And this can be done by making use of word identities for conformal symmetry. So the way we proceed is following. So we use the translation invariance to define the momentum space correlator by extracting the overall momentum conserving delta function in this way. This primed correlator is sometimes called a reduced correlator. And now the dilatation and spatial conformal word identities in momentum space take this form. So one needs to be careful about commuting this word identity operators through this delta function. So it turns out for a spatial conformal transformation, it just commutes, but for dilatation you get some extra factors of this -1 over here. So here the operators OI can have in general arbitrary index structure. So I have suppressed this index structure in this dilatation word identity and this first term in the spatial conformal word identity. But the spinning part in the spatial conformal transformation or symmetry, it acts on these indices. So that I have written explicitly.
Sorry, I didn't understand this second equation that you have. So the first line is?
First line comes from this, just the scalar part. So you in this spatial conformal word identity, you have a term corresponding to, it's just a scalar part, and then the second one, it corresponds to acting on the spin.
Right. So in the first line, even the O's that you have writing, they actually have indices, but you're not acting on them. That's what you mean. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And this sorry, go ahead. You explain.
Yeah.
No, I mean, okay. This minus d extra -1 is because of the dimensions of the delta function, is it?
Yeah. So when you take this word identity and just commute through this delta function, that minus sign comes.
Yes. So that's the dimension of the delta function.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Poincare invariance implies that the correlators depend upon n into n-1 by 2 kinematic variables pi dot pj, and the dilatation implies one constant, and the spatial conformal word identity implies n-1 constant. So total you have n constants. So the CFT correlators depend upon this n into n-1 by 2 minus n, which is n into n-3 by 2 variables, and this is also the number of conformal cross ratios expected from position space. Now the general strategy is to write down the most general ansatz for the correlator using the metric delta mu nu and the momenta p mu, and act with the word identities. So following this method, the 3-point functions involving scalars, spin 1 conserved current, and stress energy tensors have been computed. And in this talk, we focus on the correlators involving non-conserved general spinning operators together with the conserved currents. So a generic 3-point correlator can be of this form, and some of the operators can be conserved current. So in such cases, the analysis can be simplified by working with transverse stressless parts. And to understand how it works for the conserved currents, we consider a simple example. Yes?
No, there was no question.
So suppose we are interested in the correlators, say J mu O. Say O can be scalars. And J mu is a conjugate current. So we define a projector pi mu nu, which has the property that pi mu nu p mu equal to 0. And using this, we can define the transverse part of this current capital J mu in this way. So small J mu is the transverse part. And this transverse part satisfies p mu J mu equal to 0. So we can write the total current J mu as a sum of transverse and longitudinal part in this way. And using this, we can write the full correlator in this manner. Capital J mu OO is small J mu OO minus this P mu over P square, P nu J nu, then OO. So this longitudinal part now can be reduced to a 2-point function by using this local word identity. So since this J mu is a conjugate current, it satisfies a local word identity which takes this form. So left hand side involves n plus 1 operators, but right hand side involves n operators. So this second term over here, it can be reduced to just a 2-point function. And this shows that if we know the lower point correlator, we only need to focus on the transverse part of the conjugate currents. And in a similar way, if we have the insertion of stress energy tensor, we can only focus on the transverse stressless parts. And there is a general projector for general spinous operators, which I have not written, but it can be constructed using products of this pi mu nu. So we shall focus on these non-conjugate operators to be symmetric traceless tensors. And to deal with the indices of the spinning operators, it is convenient to introduce the contracted operators. So we introduce some auxiliary polarization vectors which are null. So this epsilon mu equal to 0 ensures that O is a traceless. And then we work with these contracted operators. So using this notation, we write the correlator in this manner. This O1 and O3 have conformal dimensions delta 1 and delta 3, and J is a conjugate current, so by unitarity it has conformal dimension d minus 1. Our goal is to write down a most general answer for this correlator. So I will first write down the answer and then explain how we get it. The general answer can be parameterized in this way. And so A, B1, B2 are some functions which are given by this complicated expression here. And for writing these, we have defined some auxiliary these quantities in a product of polarizations and momenta. So Z is epsilon 1 dot epsilon 3, then you have xi1, xi2, and then zeta 1, zeta 2. And this we have overall factors are like epsilon 2 pi 2 p1, epsilon 2 pi 2 epsilon 1, and epsilon 2 pi 2 epsilon 3. And to see how to get how to write these, let me consider a simple example. So for s equal to 1, this answers take this form. So first forget about these auxiliary polarization vectors. So we know that this correlator has 3 indices, say mu1, mu2, mu3. So we want to write down the most general expression with having 3 indices, but we know that this correlator has the this projector pi mu2 alpha 2. So this means that this cannot have a p2 momenta having the index alpha 2 because that will vanish. So keeping in mind this constant, we write down all possible tensor structure. And then we contract with this epsilon auxiliary polarization vectors, and then one can rearrange things in the form written here. So one can do this in general for spinous correlator. And in writing down the correlator, we have made use of the momentum conservation. And since we are considering 3-point, it means that all these functions, they only depend on the magnitude of the momenta. Since one can write the P1, inner product between momenta just using momentum conservation. And we shall refer to these functions A00 and A100, etc. as form factors. And there are a total 9 of these for S equal to 1. And now our goal is to plug this ansatz into the word identities. So the solution of this dilatation word identity fixes the functional form of the form factors in this way. So in position space, the dilatation word identity fixes this overall factors. So for example, if you see, so for example, these these factors outside, so these can be fixed by using dilatation word identity. So in momentum space, this dilatation identity fixes the form of these form factors, these arbitrary functions which appear here. In this, this fixes in terms of these functions. This involves this integral over x variable. And then this capital K is the modified Bessel function of the second kind. So you have a product of 3 such Bessel functions, and then you have this powers of the momenta, and then a power of x. So this kt which appears here, that is sum of this ki. So ki are some unknown integers at this stage. And so this dilatation word identity has fixed the functional form up to this constant ki's and this overall constants a and ab. And these functions j alpha are called triple K integrals. The dilatation word identity, so it restricts, as I said, it restricts the form to be this, and the undetermined quantities are the integers ki and these constants, and these will be fixed using special conformal word identities.
So these triple K integrals that you're talking about, those are essentially the same thing that shows up in this contact Witten diagrams in ADS, right?
Yeah, yes.
They're identical, basically. There is no conceptual difference, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So substituting the ansatz in the special conformal word identity, we obtain 2 types of equations. So if you put this ansatz into the special conformal word identity, then we have 2 types of equations. So one equation involves, so one type of equation involves second order linear PDEs. And so for example, some of these for s equal to 1 take this form. So the operator ki, which appears here, they are given by this operator. And then, so you have various equations, in fact 18 of them for just 18 of them for s equal to 1, involving these form factors. And then there are something called secondary word identities, which are essentially the equations involving the first order linear PDEs. So they have this kind of form, and for s equal to 1, there are total 11 of them. So one needs to simultaneously satisfy all these. And it turns out that the primary word identities uniquely determine these form factors up to a single undetermined constant. So we had 2 parameters ki's and these constants a1, 1, etc. And so this primary word identities, so the identities involving the second order equations, so they have fixed the these constants ki's, but you still have these undetermined constants. So each form factor is determined up to 1 this constants. So there are total 9 of them.
I mean, how many form factors were there? I just missed it. There were 18 for primary equations, right? And
So total 18 equations. So it turns out, so some of these are, in fact, 9 of these are identically satisfied.
And how many form factors were there?
9.
9. So that's why I said 9. Okay. So 9 of them are sort of independent, not independent, is it? 9.
Yeah, 9 equations are not independent. Yes. So there will be this kind of total 18 equations, but 9 of them are not independent. So these constants, they are fixed using this secondary word identities. So there
I have a. Let me also ask a question, kind of roughly related. So
Yeah.
there is this in the papers. I think you have referred to many of their works, McFadden, Skenderis, Bizowski. So I thought one of their papers, the punchline was that the general form was just writable, like in terms of some of these simplex integrals or whatever. There is a general form that you can write.
Yeah, general form is writable. You mean this ansatz?
No, I mean that the final expression for correlation functions, like endpoint correlation functions, you can just write it in terms of integrals on some simplices which are basically.
So you don't. So you write down a formal expression. So I think this was the last year's work. So this endpoint correlator using this simplices. But this is a formal expression. I mean, the explicit.
Yeah, it's exactly analogous to basically having a function of cross ratios, but in momentum space where you have to do integrals. Yeah, but it's still, I mean, as good as the the standard one in position space.
Yes. So there, I mean, the cross ratios are exactly. I mean, so cross ratios are not given in terms of momenta, but they are this integral variable. So
agree. Yeah.
So,
no, but I'm just saying that. So it looks to me that somehow this should be understood as. So what you are doing is also trying to fix the correlation functions, correct?
Yes.
So I mean, so if you know the general expression, I mean, what is the general format? So what general form is known in those papers? What is the new thing here? Is what I'm trying to understand. What is the
no, so but you still need to satisfy these. Okay? So for 3-point function, you don't. I mean, you don't have any cross ratios. First of all,
fine.
So, that expression, I mean, you still need to act with the word identities and solve things. So that expression, of course, that is a formal expression. And if you want to compute, say, some endpoint function using that correlator, I mean, using that expression. Then okay, you need to perform the integral over these cross ratios which they write. But okay, of course, for this 3-point function which I'm considering, it doesn't have any cross ratios.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think maybe you can ask it a little bit later. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, I mean, I will describe the in the end the motivation why we considered this. So then maybe it will become clearer. So this we still need to fix these constants. So these are fixed by using the secondary word identity. So the identities involving the first order differential equations. So in this case, we can have we can have two cases: delta 1 different from delta 3, delta 1 equal to delta 3. So in the first case, the coefficients are easy to determine. So you just plug these solutions in the secondary word identities, and you get expressions for these constants. So this determines all this constant in terms of just 2 parameters. So you remember, so in the position space also this happens, that for delta 1 different from delta 3, the correlator had 2 independent structure. So this is the analog of this in momentum space. For delta 1 equal to delta 3, some of the triple K integrals diverge, and we need to regularize the solution. So this can be done by shifting the parameters d and delta I, and the coefficients also. So this procedure introduces some additional coefficients. So for example, this beta 0, 0, 0, and so on. And to regularize the solution, one does the following steps. So we shift the coefficients in the solution of primary identities and the parameters in the triple K integral. So if you have triple K integrals like this, so you shift the parameters. And now we expand the triple K integral and isolate the singularities. We isolate the terms involving inverse power of epsilon. And then we choose the coefficient so that the divergent pieces vanish. So this procedure is equivalent to doing the regularization of position space expression, but here it can be handled more easily. So the singularities essentially come from the lower limit of this integral over x, here I mean just doing an expansion of this, all these singularities can be isolated. So using following this procedure, one can find a regularized solution. But here, so now the solution involves these three parameters, which is expected also from the position space. So now let me describe one of the motivation with due to which we started looking into this correlator.
Just a question. I mean, so of course, position space JJJ correlator is known. I mean, it is known, and of course, if you do if you do the brute force of regularizing it and doing the Fourier transform, do you get the result? I mean, is it as a check? Do you get
it? So you need to first, I mean, do the this regularization of the position space correlator, and then do the Fourier transform. In principle, it should match, but it turns out to be just too cumbersome. Even for spin s equal to, the Fourier transform is actually too cumbersome. And I mean, this has not been done.
It's not been done. What about the scalar? I mean, 3-point functions of scalars and so on.
That has been done. So for 3-point function of scalar, even in in the paper of Costas and his collaborators, they write down the momentum space expression by solving the this word identity as well as by doing the brute force Fourier transform.
Okay.
So is there any possibility of, let's say, missing contact terms when you do this? For instance, in 3 dimensions, in these inflation settings, people usually worry about that. So when you do the computation
yes. So usually, I mean, so these contact terms appear when you regularize the your say position space correlator.
Yeah.
And when you do Fourier transform, you get. But here by this, as I said, this regularization procedure which we perform here, so that is actually identical getting this contact term. So what happens is that which I have not included so much in this, is that sometimes you have to add a counter term to cancel the divergences. In momentum space, and those counter terms, when Fourier transform back to position space, they correspond to those position space counter terms.
So the contact terms by themselves are conformally invariant, right?
Yeah. So sometimes actually they break. I mean, there are sometimes there are anomalies, but but one can, I mean, one can. So there is a paper by Costas where they consider this anomaly. I mean, situations where sometimes these anomalies appear when you add these counter terms. So actually, the problem which I will consider, I mean, it requires this position space, momentum space expression. We wanted to study about the this gyromagnetic ratio from the CFT perspective. So the gyromagnetic ratio is a physical quantity which is of significant interest in quantum mechanics and standard model. So in a general field theory, at the lowest derivative order, we can write 2 types of couplings between the gauge field and the massive field. So one is the minimal coupling, which introduces the charge of the field. And then there is a non-minimal coupling, which is proportional to the field strength. So a cubic interaction in a generic field theory at the lowest derivative order can be written in this form. So the first term comes from the minimal coupling procedure when we replace ordinary derivative by covariant derivative. And the second term is gauge invariant by itself. So one needs to add this term also into the action at the lowest derivative order. And then you have ambiguity in the coefficient, and one defines the gyromagnetic ratio as the ratio of this factor alpha and the charge q. And
sorry, what is phi mu? I mean,
sorry, yeah. So phi mu are just some generic higher spin fields. So
okay.
It can have arbitrary index structure, which can be characterized by a general Young tableau. And this dot over here, it represents the index contraction of these fields phi mu.
Okay, and two free indices are left, which you contract with F mu nu.
Yes, yeah. I mean, so for introducing F mu nu, we need two indices. Mu nu. So if you have spinning field, which have at least one index, then you can do. And if you have like spinner field, then you have gamma mu nu to contract with. There it can appear. So the tree level unitarity in field theory. So when you demand high energy, good high energy behavior, etc. So using those demands in field theory and also in string theory in 10 dimension, they imply the classical value of G to be 2. However, that is not all. This compactification of 10-dimensional string theories also produces states which can have field theoretic interpretation. So when we compactify, say, 10-dimensional theory, and so we have this graviton and Kolb-Raymond field, which is essentially a second rank antisymmetric tensor which appears in the spectrum of string theory in 10 dimension. So when you compactify those states, you get gauge fields, and the higher spin fields can be charged with respect to these gauge fields, and these are what are called these Kaluza line and winding charges. And for a large class of such states which have this zero Kaluza line or these winding charges, the value of gyromagnetic ratio turns out to be 1. And if you have a non-zero Kaluza line and winding charges, then it depends on this gyromagnetic coupling ratio depends upon the charges and the spin of the particle. But in flat space, for the states which have field theoretic interpretation, the value of G can either be 1 or 2. So in flat space, a lot is known, but in ADS, consistent value of gyromagnetic ratio is unknown. And one of our goal is to study this gyromagnetic ratio from a CFT perspective using DCFT correspondence. And the momentum space expression of CFT correlators are needed to derive this result. So this happens because for spinning correlators, you have multiple tensor structures. So if you try to match the field theory calculation with a boundary calculation, there will usually be a mixing of tensor structures. And unless one does the regularization, this matching cannot be done, but it is easy to do it in the momentum space. So this was one of our motivation to study this topic. So let me and do some conclusion and outlook. So we have developed the tools for higher spin correlators in momentum space, and the higher spin momentum space correlators were obtained by directly solving the momentum space word identity. The expression of the 3-point functions are given in terms of triple K integrals, and the regularization of the correlators can be easily done in momentum space. And our immediate goal is to understand the gyromagnetic couplings involving higher spin fields using this formalism. And this can also be used to analyze the constants on the spectrum of CFT operators. So this gyromagnetic coupling, it will have it will show up its presence in the double trace operators in CFT. So restricting the gyromagnetic ratio will imply some restriction on the spectrum of CFT operators. So that can be studied. And then we also want to study the correlators which we have computed, how it can be applied in early universe cosmology. And then one can also try to compute Hare point functions and bootstrap in momentum space.
Okay. Any questions? I mean,
yeah, maybe can I ask you a question regarding? I meant to ask you this question anyway in the beginning, but this last comment of yours that yeah, you can bootstrap momentum correlators or correlators in momentum space. So I've got two questions. One of them is that since the procedure seems to have you need to regularize the integrals at some stage.
Yeah.
Would the bootstrap equation have ambiguities, and how would you fix those? And
Yeah,
second,
it's not yet very clear. So what happens is, so to understand the bootstrap equation, you need to actually consider, you need to know the OPs in a momentum space. But
let me also ask a quick question in relation to that. Then I think maybe we can answer. So is there an analog of the conformal block in the case of momentum space? Because without that, how would you do bootstrap?
So actually, the analog of this it's not the conformal blocks, but the analog of Witten blocks are known in the momentum space. So the Witten blocks, which I think Aninda and Rajesh, I mean, you guys used this in your Melin bootstrap program. So analog of that is known in momentum space. But to now use these to consider the set up the bootstrap equation, one needs to understand what happens to OPs. But that is not very clear. The problem is following. I mean, if you consider the say position space OP, so you need to go close to each other. So you need to take x1 close to x2. But when you do Fourier transform, of course, you need to integrate over everything. So you need to do regularization and so on. So if you naively do the just if you naively take the OP equation and do its Fourier transform, then it should translate to the higher momentum behavior in a momentum space. You are taking it.
Yeah, but that's an artifact of the fact that you're not doing point splitting carefully. I mean, if you do point splitting regularization, then you should get rid of those divergences. But my question was that would point splitting give rise to new ambiguities?
Yes, it gives actually new ambiguities.
So those have to be fixed somehow by comparing with some known answer or something like that.
Yes. So that is the issue, I mean, which has prevented so far the application of this momentum space formalism in conformal bootstrap. But I mean, here, I mean, imposing crossing is easy in momentum space, but then one needs to understand this OP behavior.
Right. Also, is
So,
there a unique,
I have a question which is a rather naive question, but somewhat related to this class of questions, which is that when you study OPs in ordinary space, we intuitively, at least even at the start of the game, we expect that as the 2 points come close together, the ultraviolet behavior of the theory will kick in and produce singularities. Can you tell me why, when the two momenta come together, you expect a singularity? Or are you? I mean, maybe I did not understand what kinds of singularities you are looking at in momentum space. But when you have OP1 and OP2, and when P1 goes towards P2, why do we even expect a singularity?
I have also a related question. Let me just ask that also.
I mean, x1 going close to x2 is not same as, I mean,
Mrityunjay, can I also ask a quick question in relation to that?
yes.
So like the question of the analog of coincident singularities in momentum space will be some sort of high momentum, like you have to go to the boundary of momentum or something like that. But is there a unique way of capturing it? It seems like
So it's not unique. So okay, let me go to my slide. So 1 minute.
Sorry, Chetan. Maybe I think you may have parenthetically answered my question, but at a high level higher than I understood. What do you mean by?
Yeah, so I think it's not coincident singularities in momentum space, but I think they're divergent. But still, I think the question is valid, I think, at some level.
So let's consider this 3-point correlator. This 3-point correlator in position space. Now what you can do is you can try to do Fourier transform of both sides. And so right hand side will involve some e raised to I k dot x k1 dot x1 k2 dot x2 k3 dot x3. So now you do say integral over say so you want to take evaluate it in the OPE limit by taking x1 close to x2. So in the right hand side you do integral over x3. So you will get a function involving some x1 minus x2, and then you will have factor this 1 upon x1 2 to the power delta 1 plus delta 2 minus delta 3, and then e raised to I k1 dot x1 k2 dot x2. So so this naive OPE behavior in momentum space, so that will be valid if this function which you obtain by integrating over this x3 is a nice function. But what turns out is that it is not always nice function. I mean, depending on the values of this delta and d, delta 3 and d, it can have singularities, that function f, and that
But maybe we can even look at your 2-point function, no?
Yes.
Can you explain the point you were making about momentum space divergences or momentum space singularities just by looking at the 2-point function?
Yeah. So
in the real space, we sort of understand that when x1 goes to x2, there are, as Anindya also said, there is an issue regarding there are issues regarding point splitting and all, which have to be done carefully, right? Right, you do x1 and x2 is x1 plus delta, and then there is a point splitting has to be done carefully, depending on which theory you're looking at. Sometimes you even have to introduce a Wilson loop if you're looking at gauge theories, but these questions persist. Now, when you do this study in momentum space, when you're looking at conformal field theories in momentum space, it is not obvious to me that phi of P1 and phi of P2, when P1 goes to P2, has a singularity. Or did I misunderstand your whole seminar?
Let me see following. So if you do the Fourier transform of this 2-point function, so what you will get is say suppose you have this x1 x2, suppose you set x2 equal to 0. So then the Fourier transform will involve some p to the power some actually it is 2 delta minus d kind of thing, and then there are various gamma functions. And it turns out that this Fourier transform doesn't exist for certain value of this delta and d, and there the behavior is like some p to the power something. So depending on this value of delta and d, either I mean it is analytic or it will involve some singularities, and it turns out that for the values for which this Fourier transform doesn't exist, so those values precisely correspond to doing the renormalization here in position space. So so they correspond to the contact term here in this thing, and corresponding to these, I mean there you have all these counter terms in momentum space. I don't know if it solves, I mean it answers the question.
No, I think maybe I need to understand a little bit more. So are you saying that if you compute phi of P1 and phi of P2, then that correlator is not of the form 1 over P1 minus P2 to some power.
No. I mean,
when delta equals 1, certainly, I mean, in 4 dimension, if you do the Fourier transform, it's 1 by p squared, correct?
yeah. Okay. Yes.
Equals a half. Yeah, half. Right?
Half, okay.
Yes.
Delta equals 1 in this, it has to be 1 by x squared, I mean, x1 squared, and then it's 1 by p squared.
Yeah.
So for that, it's simple. So
Yeah,
you're saying arbitrary delta, it is not true. You're saying so it won't be.
for generic deltas. I mean, you need to have these counter terms. For generic delta, of course, this Fourier transform will not exist.
Right. Generic delta, it will not exist.
So, but if it doesn't exist for generic deltas, is it because can you identify regions in P space where the Fourier transform doesn't exist for that delta?
Yeah, it is possible. I mean, it has been done. It is possible. I mean, for 2-point function, one can isolate the region, and for generic delta, one can do this thing. In fact, there is also a physical application of this in n equal to 4 super Yang-Mills. So there are certain half BPS operators which have precisely this conformal dimension for which this Fourier transform doesn't exist. And so there, I mean, so it appears there, but okay, you need to add these counter terms to make it well defined.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody else has some questions.
No, I was wondering, I mean, you said somehow, I mean, since I had worked on some parts of this, like for parity odd, there are certain, I mean, you said in parity odd correlators, somehow momentum space is important or something.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Sachin Chan and his collaborators, they have been working on this. Okay, I have not followed.
I mean, there was some point you mentioned, but I was wondering, what is the new thing you gain when you do it
So here, I mean, okay, our goal was to do, actually, our goal is to do actually analyze this gyromagnetic coupling. So it's related to the previous work which we did, I mean, with Massimo and Raffaele. So we had a few months back, we wrote a paper studying this gyromagnetic coupling under compactification. And so we studied, and then we wanted to study this thing in ADS, and that actually prompted us to study this thing. So I agree, of course, there is this formalism is there for momentum space now. Of course, for it has all been done for the conserved current in general. So, but this one we have, okay, I mean, the expressions we have now, those can be applied to arbitrary spinous correlator which are non-conserved and so on. So that is the
okay. Just yeah. Okay. Just okay. I'll come back now. No. Okay. I'll catch you actually. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and gyromagnetic ratio, I just wanted to, you haven't got any results also. I mean, you just started.
We have started computation, but yeah, we hope to finish it in we hope to put out the paper by the beginning of next year or something.
So there was a lot of static. So I will just ask a general question. So there was a lot of discussion, which I think Sachin's question had something, and I think at that time my connection kind of got bad. So what is the general punchline of why momentum space correlators are so much harder than position space ones?
Yeah. So
what is the general reason?
Yeah, so general reason is that you need to directly solve these word identities, and which are like the second order, this differential equation of hypergeometric kind, and these are, I mean, this makes it much harder because unlike position space, you cannot directly try to write down the correlator using conformal symmetry, because as we saw, this conformal conformal transformation acts non-trivially on the Mandelstam variables, so those are not invariant. And also these conformal cross ratios. So these conformal cross ratios in momentum space are not given in terms of momenta, but they are given in terms of some auxiliary quantities. So if you represent, as you mentioned,
but at that I thought like McFadden, McFadden's Skender's paper, I thought their whole idea was that you can write these an analog of these conformal cross ratios in terms of momenta on these internal lines.
So they don't
Ratios
write momenta, but they introduce some auxiliary quantities. So if you have simplex, so there is a line connecting, say, 2 points on the in the simplex, and those lines, so associated to each line, they so
they have a variable, integration variable
q, and which is the analog of this cross ratios. But
you're saying it's not directly momenta.
Yeah, no, it's not directly momenta.
So it's the dual version of momenta. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like because they do, because they do like a translation from these, triangles or whatever to meshes or whatever, and then so that's okay. I see. So that's not momenta. That's some. So maybe the point is that one should write correlation functions in that space. Would you say that?
I mean, they write a formal expression in using that, using that auxiliary space. Yes.
Okay. Anyway, thanks for a very nice talk.
Thanks. So, any other questions? Okay. If not, let's thank Mrityunjay actually. Yeah. I'll be in touch, Mrityunjay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.